Good afternoon, and for many of you, this is just another one in the long line of webinars or Zoom meetings you've attended today. We're honored you are taking the time to join us and hope we provide you with tips, tools, and resources you can use. My name is Bonnie Zimmerman, Program Specialist at OSPI. Today's topic is High School and Beyond Planning and IEPs. The High School and Beyond Plan is a graduation requirement and important to students as they look to an uncertain future. OSPI's vision, mission, and values: all students prepared for post-secondary pathways, careers, and civic engagement. OSPI has an equity statement. Each student, family, and community possesses strengths and cultural knowledge that benefits their peers, educators, and schools. This webinar was brought to you through the Office of System and School Improvement. Our objective today is for you to understand how to engage expertise to support high school and beyond planning, and to learn from an ESD and a state champion how they are implementing these supports. As always, we want to provide resources to help you get started. Today we're joined by Alexandra Toney, OSPI Special Education Program Supervisor. Alex brought with her Abby Smith from Puget Sound ESD and Hirschmann from Seattle University Center for Change and Transition. Thank you so much for being with us today. I would like to introduce Alex Toney, Special Education Program Supervisor.
I'm Alexandra Toney. I'm going to frame today's discussion in the why for why we should align high school and beyond plans and IEP transition plans. Then I'm going to transition to Abby and Chris, who are our state content champions, and they're going to share some more information and a collaborative team approach to aligning high school and beyond plans and IEP transition plans. So I just wanted to start by framing our talk today in the purpose of both Every Student Succeeds Act, ESSA, and IDEA. So ESSA's purpose is to close the achievement gap and offer a significant opportunity to get equitable and high quality education. And this is also aligned with the purpose of IDEA, which is that the provision of special education is to ensure access and progress in the general education curriculum and to prepare students for further education, employment, and independent living. So the high school and beyond plan and the other graduation parts are established by the State Department of Education and are specific to how our state will be building off of both ESSA and IDEA to create graduation policies that ensure that the course of study is characterized by high expectations and allows for flexibility when it's needed. And our graduation policies also support all students in their secondary and post-secondary goals. So the second thing I wanted to talk about is a little bit of the background that shows that placement in the general education classroom improves outcomes for students with special education needs, and that inclusive practices are shown to have a positive or a neutral outcome for all students. So this information and our student demographics, which we're going to go into in the next slide, will demonstrate that 85 to 90% of students with a disability can progress in grade level curriculum with appropriate supports. So just like this information guides our practices for inclusion in the general education classroom, it also informs and guides our practices around high school and beyond plan programming and supports. So if you'd like to dig into some of this information, I've included all of the links here as well. So I framed this a little bit. I wanted to talk today about the current landscape of 2019 students with disabilities. And this slide shows that broken down by eligibility status in our state. So you can see that the most common eligibility categories, which are highlighted in blue, are health impairment, communication disorder, and specific learning disability. And together, these account for over 70% of all students on IEPs. I also wanted to point out that only 3.7% of our students are identified as having an intellectual disability. So keep these numbers in your mind as we transition to our next slide that has some outcome data for our students. So this slide provides information on the post-school outcomes for our students with IEPs. So 1 year after these students leave high school, school staff contact them to complete a post-school survey. And this tells us whether the student is engaged in post-secondary education or employment. And this is also our state performance plan indicator B14. So the information in this slide is the most current data we have. It's for 2017-18 students who completed the survey on or before November 1st, 2019. So I wanted to bring your attention to the yellow bar at the bottom, which indicates that 25.3%, or more than a fourth of our students on IEPs, are not employed or involved in any post-secondary education or training 1 year after high school. So this is the area that we want to see the smallest, and it's a huge equity concern, and it's our call to action. Remember, only 3.7% of our students have an intellectual disability, and also our IDEA charge, which is to prepare all of our students for further education, employment, and independent living. So we've just really briefly gone over the purpose of IDEA and ESSA, some student demographics, and some outcome data for our students with IEPs that really demonstrates that we need to take action both individually and systemically to address barriers and equity for our students with a disability. So some of these barriers are outlined on the slide. They can include things like a lack of access and opportunity from content experts, staffing models that create issues with collaboration. So I'm going to transition to Chris now, who's going to walk us through some guidance and some best practices to break down some of these barriers that are contributing to our high percentage of no engagement for our students on IEPs.
I'm Kris Hirschmann. I'm from the Center for Change and Transition Services at Seattle University. We're one of the state needs projects that our charge is primarily to look at the information that you just saw about post-school outcomes for students and to help schools with addressing some of the gaps in services. So today I'm going to talk a little bit about what the definition of transition services are in alignment with high school and beyond plans, and Abby and I will go through lots of different ideas about how these things align and how different strategies can be used. So the federal law, IDEA, defines transition services as a coordinated set of activities for a student with a disability that is outcome-oriented and focuses on academic and functional achievement. It's designed to make a seamless transition from school to adult life. So it looks at how do we help facilitate the move of supports that a student may need, of activities that they can be involved in to prepare them for their next steps, and considering things like post-secondary education, voc ed, integrated employment, continuing and adult education, adult services, and independent living and community participation. Based on the individual's child's needs, taking into account their strengths, preferences, interests, and it includes these particular bullet points around instruction, related services, community experiences, employment and other post-school adult living objectives, and if appropriate, independent living skills. Remembering that independent living skills are activities that are not just getting yourself dressed and fed, but it's also about all those things you do to live independently as an adult. In addition, it has the provision of a functional vocational evaluation that is sometimes provided by school districts and sometimes not, because we do age-appropriate assessments. Transition services are designed and developed in the IEP with a particular flow that is important, where everything that follows under the transition assessment really builds the IEP, the students' experiences in schools, and the pathways for their post-school services. So we begin with conducting an age-appropriate assessment that takes into those 4 criteria of strengths, preferences, interests, and needs. And assessments can be a lot of different things. They don't happen just once. It's not a one and done. And it is something that we know as students have different experiences, sometimes their interests and preferences change. So we have to be well aware of that. We'll come back and talk about that when we look at high school and beyond plans, because this is one of those areas that strongly aligns with high school and beyond plans. From the information out of the age-appropriate transition assessments, students write their post-secondary goals. And in the IEP process, that's oftentimes guided by adults versus students. In the high school and beyond plan, it's more student-generated. So we look at education, employment, and independent living. Then we identify what kinds of activities and services are required for the student to be successful in that pathway towards their post-school goals, along with a course of study, writing those annual goals that they work on daily in school, and coordinating with adult agencies in order for that handoff, if it's necessary, to be there and be strong for the student as they're moving from school to the adult world. And the other side, as we're talking about, is what's the high school and beyond plan? Well, remember the transition component of the IEP is a federal government requirement and state requirement for students who receive special education services. High school and beyond plan is a state graduation requirement. And I think those are two really distinctive things to remember in your mind. For every student in Washington State, it's required that they have a high school and beyond plan as part of their access to leaving school with a diploma. As was stated this morning, it starts in 8th grade particularly, but 7th grade or earlier, and is that kind of ticket to go into high school and continue in high school with some plans around what are their goals, what courses are they going to take, what experience are they going to have that are going to prepare them for their post-secondary goals as well. So it's student generated, which is a little different than an IEP, although we encourage students to be very involved in their IEP process, and I'm really looking to having more and more of the IEPs in our state student-led rather than just adult-led. And the high school and beyond plan is student-facing. Student can access it any time, whereas the IEP is more centrally located in some sort of a system that is accessed by adults more often than students. So some of the things that we've been doing around the high school and beyond plan is, once again, starting with 8th grade. And notice the two things that are happening in 8th grade is an interest inventory, very similar to that age-appropriate assessment, and setting up some career goals. So in the IEP land, that would be setting up your post-secondary employment goals and education goals. In the high school and beyond plan, they're also working on that academic course plan, which aligns with the IEP's course of study, that looks at what kinds of courses you're going to take, what do those look like, are there some equivalency courses that can be put in there, and are there some support classes that might be necessary? And then finally, developing a resume and an IEP log. So what's new this year is it's required that everybody receive information about federal and state financial aid. The students with IEPs get the same high school and beyond planning with similar staff as their classmates. So the high school and beyond plan along with the IEP can be done jointly, with a lot of those things crossing over, and we'll talk a little bit about that. That doesn't mean that they're not still two separate documents. This year, I think you heard this morning about the SBA scores need to inform grade level course choices, and that's a little bit on hold, as is anything except going to the grocery store or to the pharmacy. So when we look at the framework that high school and beyond plans are connected with, it's this, I always call it a pencil because it looks like a pencil to me, but I'm not sure that's what it's intended to do. But it looks at three very specific areas: career, college, and life, with some activities that occur in the high school and some activities that are preparing for that beyond part of the high school. So you can see it in the high school section. There's interest inventories, setting goals, writing a resume, having a 4-year course plan under the career section. In the beyond part of the career section, there's work-based learning experiences such as job shadows and internships. So those are the preparatory activities that will move students to their next step beyond. There's some research that's done by the student to achieve career goals and job applications. If we move to the college, it's about looking at those post-secondary educational goals, looking at what is their 4-year high school course plan and how does that relate to those goals, identifying dual credits if necessary, and then also looking at what financial aid options are available. If we're looking then at the second part of that and the beyond, it's about what post-secondary programs, experiences can the student be involved in to get an idea of what that's going to look like. So are those site visits? Are they conversations with different universities and colleges, or apprenticeship programs, or whatever it might be that they're moving on to? And then looking at applications and financial aid. And then finally, the last one, which I kind of think should be the first one, is looking at life. Who am I? What do I want to do with my life? What will I become, and what do I need to do to get there? And then the activities around that are around, how do I budget for that? What are some experiences that can build my skills so I can be successful in that? And then also having students present to guardians or communities about what they're doing. Okay, Abby.
Thanks, Chris. For everybody was use a high school and beyond down a little bit. So we broke it down by high school and beyond plan / IEP components and the instructional component. If you look at this, the starred areas that are green would be the instructional component under career under high school. That's the resume and activity log. And for beyond, that's the research on what it takes to achieve career goals and the job application. Then under the college section, it's the identification of financial aid options, including the college-bound scholarship, post-secondary program experience, post-secondary program admission applications, and financial aid applications. And lastly, in the life section, it's budgeting for life after high school. The yellow stars are for the high school and beyond planning / IEP components. And so in the career area, those are career interests and skills inventories, identification of career goals, 4-year high school course plan, work-based learning experience, and under college, the high school and beyond planning / IEP components would be identification of educational goals, 4-year high school course plan, and then under the life section, it would be who am I? What problems would I like to solve, which is a great question for kids to think about if they're not sure what they want to do in their future, and what will I become? How will I get there? And then to think about volunteer or community service experience. Who might have some of this information? So this might be for the green areas, that's instructional components. So as you can see, there's a lot of information available. And in the first column, it says school counseling. And what we want to make sure to note is that that's referring to the school counseling staff, not mental health counselors. But there's a wide range of resources you can get to support a student within the school. The school counseling staff are going to have access to support the students in a variety of ways. The special ed classes meet with the case manager. The case manager will be able to give you information possibly related to the resume activity log, research, job applications, identification of financial aid, post-secondary programs, including admission, and then also with helping the student budget for life after high school. A lot of this same information is also possibly available for students to work on as well with the general ed classes. And the family would possibly have information about job applications, post-secondary program experience, and applications, and then financial aid and budgeting. And lastly, the student is the person that this is about. And so obviously they would have information to support possibly with jobs they've applied to with the resume, what they're thinking about doing, research on career goals, looking at the job applications that might be looking at, post-secondary program experience, where have they gone to visit, have they had any meetings with colleges or trade schools or any of the post-secondary programs that they're looking at, as well as admission applications.
Now I want to talk a little bit about some predictors of post-school success, particularly around students with special needs. Evidence-based predictors of post-school success basically come out of some research done by David Test and Mazzotti. So they include things like career awareness, where students are learning about opportunities of education and skills needed for various career pathways, community experiences that are occurring outside the school setting and supporting in-class instruction, where students apply academic, social, and/or general work behaviors and skills. Exam requirements, those standardized tests that students do, and we find that if students are prepared to take those and are working on that, they have a higher success rate in post-school activities. Inclusion is one of the strongest predictors of post-school success, where students have access to the general education curriculum and are engaged in their regular education or general education classes with their peers without disabilities. This is a huge indicator for success on the job and in higher education, in that they learn best how to work with other people. Interagency collaboration, having a clear and purposeful design process that we collaborate with agencies to support people as they're moving from school to adult life, but also while they're in school, and looking at those, how do we work together early on so that students can make what we call a seamless transition. Occupational courses, and these are support career awareness and allow for students to explore different kinds of careers either in live situations, virtually, or in classrooms. Certainly paid employment is a high predictor. Students who experience the opportunity to work when they're younger, as many of us did, flipping burgers or doing whatever we did, that prepared us for the ability to learn and maintain on a job site. Parental involvement, although it's something that oftentimes students don't want to be engaged with, and sometimes we forget to ask parents to join us in helping with the planning for their students' future. We find this to be a very high indicator of post-school success, because as students move from entitlement programs, which schools are, to agencies out in the community that are eligibility based, sometimes that parent involvement is really the advocacy that student needs to get the supports they need to be successful. Having an articulated program of study, learning self-care and independent living skills, and probably one of the highest rated is self-determination and self-advocacy, the ability to make choices, solve problems, ask for help, understand their disability and what supports they need to move forward with successful employment or successful higher education is a very important part that we can start very early in our educational system. Social skills, extremely important. I've talked with many businesses and employers for many years, and they say the primary reason people are fired from their jobs is not because they can't do the job. It's because they can't get along with their peers. So those social skills are extremely important. Having good student support from their peers, transition services as they're moving from school to work, opportunities to be included in career and technical education courses and learn the trade or craft that is aligning with their post-school outcomes. And then finally, that opportunity to be involved with work study, where the student develops work attitudes and general work behaviors with some good planning and some good outcome focus.
The transition team. The team members and the roles may be configured differently between schools, but it's imperative that teams work together to effectively meet the needs of each student and to ensure high school and beyond planning for students with disabilities are delivered in the same manner and with the same staffing as for all other students. Transition planning is a student-centered activity that requires a collaborative effort in order to address student needs in the areas of education, employment, and personal responsibility, relationships, home and family, leisure pursuits, community involvement, and physical and emotional health. Together, special and general educators, school counselors, principals, students, families, and other key stakeholders can guarantee effective transition services for students with disabilities through the long-term high school and beyond planning and IEP planning processes. The success of transition planning really hinges on the ability of each member to follow through with their agreed upon act. The student is the most important person in the process. It's integral that you involve them from an early age and early start to support them the most and help them receive the best outcome. So make sure you want to promote early involvement in the IEP process, encourage and expect active involvement, prepare them for involvement in leadership, teach self-determination and self-advocacy, as Chris mentioned, listen to their voice, value their opinions and thoughts, and help them understand the processes involved. Parents and families make the key decisions related to transition. They need to be present to assume and participate in transition planning and team meetings as equal partners with school personnel. The primary role of parents during transition planning is to encourage and support students to plan and achieve their educational goals. Parents should also encourage students to develop independent decision-making and self-advocacy skills starting at a young age. The involvement of teachers, school counselors, vocational educators, social workers, psychologists, etc., are essential to the high school and beyond planning and IEP transition planning process. Note that the transition team members and roles may be configured differently between schools, but it's imperative that teams work together to effectively meet the needs of each student and to ensure high school and beyond planning for students with disabilities are delivered in the same manner and with the same staffing as for all other students. McLaughlin and Millett offer implications for school principals who want to foster a collaborative culture for students with disabilities receiving appropriate transition services. They suggested the following 5 things principals need to know about special education. A, the legal entitlements of special education. B, how to match effective instruction with the learning characteristics of students. C, that special education is a program, not a place. How to meaningfully include students with disabilities in assessments. And E, how to create an inclusive environment in school settings. Adult service providers and agencies such as DVR, the Department of Vocational Rehabilitation, DDA, Developmental Disability Association, and College Disability Specialists can be the next source of resources for students as they leave the world of K-12 school entitlement and move to resources that are dependent upon eligibility. Community partners are great folks, great people to access. The community is in a position to develop and support programs that assist in the transition planning process. These programs should exist in the areas of employment, residence, and recreation.
There are a couple of questions. Someone's asking if you can touch more on the same supports as their peers. Many of their teachers, case managers of students with intellectual multiple disabilities have been receiving pushback from CTE and college and career counselors regarding this.
The new legislation came out very clearly talking about the teams should not be different, and should be at least similar to those teams that are helping students without disabilities develop their high school and beyond plan. So typically the IEP team is built around families and service providers, whereas the high school and beyond team is more around the general ed staff and support staff that are providing activities and guidance for students without disabilities.
Essentially, the idea is that we're ensuring sort of equitable access to these supports across the continuum of our students. And at the same time, I think it's important to recognize when there are those students who need things delivered in a slightly different way to be able to access the information. And so that is, as always with the high school and beyond plan, a local decision around how these supports are being provided across the entire continuum of your student body.
I agree with that. And then I would just kind of go back to that equity slide that I had earlier on, that like the point of this is that we don't want a separate system for our students on IEPs, right? We want them to have the same connection to content experts who can help. And then from Appendix A on teaming that you guys all did some homework on, it really is a collaborative effort that requires the expertise of general education teachers, CTE, school counselors, special education teachers. So we don't want there to be a separate process where there's not collaboration happening. Each school will have a different system to develop and implement high school and beyond plans. We would just want it to be similar for gen ed students and special education students.
Thank you. I think we have a couple more questions. What does a high school and beyond plan look like for a student that is unable to complete a high school and beyond plan independently?
Well, I think with any student, if they need support in completing any task we're asking them, we have to figure out what supports are needed. So I think observation from I assume where the question is around a student who has really significant cognitive delays and may need some support in answering questions. And I believe that that information can be gathered from multiple sources, particularly families, parents, observations from school personnel about where that student's skills lie, where their interests might exist, and then being really creative on what kinds of activities and courses and experiences would assist the student in moving towards a pathway of a post-secondary goal. So is there a way you can think to engage parents at a higher level or students at a higher level, or maybe administration and principals? How to engage your adult services personnel differently? Offer food. I love that, Tracy. Drinks also help. You know, any ideas? Because I think this is sometimes where we get stuck, is we say, oh, this isn't going to work because we know whoever, Mr. X, Mrs. X, whoever it is, they're not going to come. So what are we going to do? We really need their input. Well, now are some really creative times where we can start thinking of ideas on how to engage those people at a different level. So sometimes it's our general ed staff that I have to figure out how to get to those meetings, but other times it may be families or business partners or agency personnel, all of those kinds of things. Sometimes going to an agency office for an IEP meeting is really powerful. Student-led conferences, person-centered planning, great ideas. Building a rapport, starting the conversations early is one really powerful way to start getting more inclusive activities going and getting people involved. When students have a student-led conference and the student is doing the invitation to whomever they want to be at that conference, it's a pretty powerful tool. It's hard to say no to a student when they invite you to something that they're running. So great ideas, you guys. So the when, who, how part. So just to kind of start putting together what happens with a high school and beyond plan and what's happening in an IEP. Transition plan. High school and beyond plans start at 7th or 8th grade. Transition plans don't start till 16. We have a little bit of an age gap there. So what are we doing to help coordinate those activities? Are we considering some different kinds of things there? High school and beyond plan is student generated and student facing, whereas the IEP is a team generated. High school and beyond plans are facilitated with staff, reviewed and updated yearly, and are a requirement of the state for graduation, whereas IEP plans also are reviewed and updated yearly. However, they're a federal requirement. They have measurable outcomes, and they guide all the activities that are in the IEP. Last year, OSPI published a guidance for aligning high school and beyond plans and transition plans. And so here's just a sample, but aligning that there are some things that are happening for every student, and there's some additional things that need to happen for special ed students as well. So if we look at all students are required to do the things on the left side, while special ed students are also doing all the things that all the other students, but we have some additional things that are required by federal law that need to be identified in the IEP. A lot of question comes around what are some strategies to help this process go? What's going to make this a successful process? And I think sometimes we have to give families, particularly families with students with disabilities, the permission to dream and start thinking about what's going to happen beyond tomorrow or even today. Giving students and families the opportunity to dream and visualize the future. You need to start the conversation early. Prepare students for independence, and that's hard because we all want to protect our students, we want to protect our children, but sometimes we have to push a little bit for self-determination, self-advocacy, decision-making, and so on. Teach those soft skills that are so important in being able to move from situation to situation, not just to work or just to higher ed, but also other situations as far as social situations are concerned as well. Have high expectations and a rigorous curriculum. Actively engage students in their learning with their post-school goals in mind. Just as we do when we're teaching a class, we put up the objectives of what we're going to be doing that day. As a high school teacher, it's great to put up, here's what we're doing today, and here's how it relates to your future. And start making those connections. Actually, you could do that in elementary school and in middle school as well. Teach the students the 28 skills of really ready student, and this is a live link that you can look at. But it includes things like critical thinking, self-awareness, responsibility for decision making, being flexible and adaptable, being an active learner, and so on. Provide opportunities for students to explore their careers in their community. Let them get outside the doors of our schools, and we can do that not only physically but virtually, as you're all learning very well right now, that there's lots of avenues for students to experience things in a very different way using technology. Access work-based experiences. There are work-based experiences that are already established through career technical education. Get in there, access those, and if there's something that doesn't match your students' needs, then try to figure out how we're going to create an experience for that particular need for that student. Think outside the box, or as if there is no box. Every time we think outside the box, we build a new box. So try to keep those walls down and think about how can we creatively come up with some ideas on how to meet the students' needs for their success in the adult world. Engage your community, your business clubs, and activities that are going on in the community. It's about not just being a worker, but also being an active member of our community that really shows success and inclusivity. So that's an important part to assure that we're not only just creating workers, but creating citizens. If your student has a case manager, partner with the case manager special education team and the students to support their navigation through high school. And how do we help them not only do what the checklist tells us that we need to do, but also those other skills that are required, how to create friends and keep friends and those kinds of things that are lifelong activities. Some of us have dear friends that we went to school with that 50 years later are still my friends. Create a district letter that's sent to family explaining the likenesses and the differences between the high school beyond plan and transition plans so they don't feel that they're doing double duty. And create opportunities to provide evidence-based practices for post-school success for all students. So this is something that you don't need to do right now, but you can do later. The high school and beyond plan checklist, that little side-by-side that was up there before, has lists of things that's happening. Look at those activities and see which ones you're covering on a daily or consistent basis. See which ones are on your radar. Are there some ones that you kind of know that you should be doing, but you haven't quite gotten them all together into your routine? And then what are some ones that you aren't addressing at all? After you do that, either individually or with members of your team, consider where you want to be next year with these tasks and what can you do to get there. So we have some references that we went through. Now we're up for questions.
How do you help students whose parent also has disabilities?
That's a great question. Pulling in the resources that may be supporting that parent may be an important component, as well as really thinking about what language do we use and how do we approach the whole idea of high school and beyond plans and IEPs and all that to help them understand the process. I think that also involving agencies such as DVR or Division of Vocational Rehabilitation or DDA, Developmental Disabilities Agency, I think. I can never remember the A, it used to be a D, are also supports that can help with the families as students are transitioning from school to the adult world. Now, one of the things that you have to remember, however, is of course confidentiality, but also youth who are over 18 are oftentimes emancipated adults. And so assuring that their rights and confidentiality are secure as well is something to just kind of be aware of as you're doing those kinds of supports. Please feel free to invite DVR earlier to transition IEPs. DVR is a great agency to help support, particularly through activities like pre-employment transition services, which once again can align with the activities that are required in the high school and beyond plan. Really have some powerful tools that can not only support what's happening in schools, but also support the youth as they're leaving schools.
A couple more questions. The question is, what are your top 3 considerations for high school and beyond plans and IEPs in light of COVID-19? That might be a topic for another webinar.
It could be, but I think probably access would be the first thing, is what is available and thinking outside the box. Some of these activities, when we think about them in a classroom, can actually be fairly easily translated to online work, and thinking about resources that are already established and not recreating the wheel. If you're looking at, let's say, doing virtual job shadows, there's lots of opportunities for that, or exploration of different kinds of employment. There are websites that will support that. And if you want to jump onto CCTS's website, there are lots of resources there for you. Mark, your question about lack of support in rural areas is a great one. That's a toughie.
Well, to go along with that, Chris, someone's asking, what about students who are homeless?
I have lost sleep over what's happening with our students who are homeless, and how are they getting what they need and what supports they need. Not just, I think of Maslow's hierarchy, first of all, how are they just getting their basic needs taken care of, let alone thinking about their high school graduation, high school beyond plans and transition plans. I mean, as far as I'm concerned, that's pretty low on their list of priorities, would be my guess. But I think, that's where our creativity is, pulling in who we know knows that student and how we can access that student to provide whatever they need is our challenge here. Probably not a great answer. It's all I got, though.
Then when would you invite DVR to IEP meetings?
There's a couple of measures that I always say about inviting any agency to the IEP meeting. First of all, you have to know why you're inviting them. Am I inviting DVR to give just general information about what DVR is and what they can provide? That may happen, maybe not at an IEP meeting, but maybe at a bigger meeting where we have lots of students that are involved in hearing that information. If I'm inviting DVR because we believe the student's eligible for services and they want to sign up for services, then that's why when I want them there physically to say, okay, here's what we need to do. Sometimes we invite DVR because we're stuck. And when I was in the classroom, I had students who had pretty complex needs, and I would invite the DVR counselor and say, okay, I've tried all the things that I have in my toolbox here to figure out, where we can help the student move forward. Can you come up with some other things? And sometimes they would come up with the most brilliant solutions to the stuckness that were not complex solutions, not pricey solutions. They were just a different perspective and saying, well, why don't you try this and see if that works? They're partners in this. They're not, but they're not strange people. They're not scary people. They have a lot of knowledge that we don't have, and they can provide us with a lot of different supports.
How do we handle parents that ask for compensatory services through this crisis? Do we have a resource for them? Can we point them in the right direction?
Scott Robb is our parent liaison. He is an excellent resource. I can put his contact information in here. And then I would also share that the guidance document that I linked earlier has some guidance on that, including some optional forms that help IEP teams determine if extended school year or comp ed is needed.
We have some resources. We have the high school and beyond planning, transition planning checklist for educators, 28 skills of a really ready student, National Center on Secondary Education in Transition, Zero Center Transition Education Resources, Transition Coalition, Soft Skills to Pay the Bills, and OSPI Secondary Transition. We have a sister webinar series, and that is the MTSS, or the Multi-Tiered Systems of Support PLC webinar series, and they have some really great nationally recognized presenters. If you're interested in participating in the May 8th PLC, please email Robin Howe at k12.wa.us. She'd be happy to send you the link to that. We have another online opportunity coming up, and it's leading through the master schedule. We have Stephen Gehring will be presenting a 90-minute webinar on April 21st from 10 to 11:30. Clock hours will be provided. My name's Bonnie Zimmerman, Alex Toney, Chris Hirschmann, Abby Smith. Our contact information is here in case you want to get in touch with us. We'd be happy to help you or get you the help that you need. Can you talk more about the middle school assessment and transition plan age-appropriate assessments? They have counselors asking how they should approach it for students who have visual, physical, or other disabilities that would not allow them to do the same online assessment as students use.
There's a lot of different assessments you can use with students, and so if they're not able to do one online, I would think that you could access another one and work through it with the student.
And in addition, don't forget that technology can help you out here. Using a screen reader for students who have difficulty reading, having people assist students with marking the box or whatever they need to have done. But just the fact that they may have a reading disability or maybe in a wheelchair or perhaps have low cognitive abilities doesn't necessarily mean that they cannot access what every other student has. You have to try it before you assume it won't work.
So here's one about the juvenile justice system. The question is from Barbara Thompson, and it says, we muddle along as best we can in juvenile justice, but being a unique situation for kids, we're not quite sure how to approach this with a transient and often dropout population. Any suggestions?
So I'm assuming you're talking about high school and beyond plan primarily, or also transition planning?
Oh, she says both.
Okay. From my experience in working with juvenile justice, it depends on where they are. If they're in a place like Raymond Hall, where they may be there for a day, in a day, out a day, or there for a week, it's certainly harder than if they're in a juvenile justice long-term facility. So a long-term facility, I think you have a little more control over timing and gathering information, helping them through the process, walking up side by side with them through it. In those short term, I wish I had a magic wand on how to do that, because I think there's difficulties at multiple levels on engaging students where you only have them for a very brief time. However, I think there are some ways that you can do that. CCTS, agency I work for, Center for Change and Transition Services, has a transition portfolio that's web-based, that you can go in and do one assignment with a student for a day and get them started thinking about what is their post-school activities and what does that look like. Do some just kind of conversation dreaming of things with students about, if you weren't incarcerated, what would you rather be doing? Or something along those lines, where you can really start, once again, helping them recreate or create a vision for their future. But that's a free curriculum that has 36 lessons in it, that you can make it short or long. You can do it in a scaffolded way or individually. It's just something that you could easily grab and go with.
So I would add too, I don't know if Barbara's reached out to juvenile justice places out other places around the state, but I'm assuming that they probably have similar questions. And if they were able to brainstorm ideas maybe, and then that might be helpful. And then I like your ideas about conversations and just to know too that there's a lot of options out there available that are for the non-traditional student or person who needs more support coming out of incarceration.
Rebecca is interested in alternatives to exclusion. Who would she contact?
So I would reach out to me, Alexandra Toney. I'd be happy to chat with you, and then Kim can also be a contact on that.
Last question. To better inform the process, is feedback gathered from students on the high school and beyond plan process, perhaps as they are ready to leave high school?
I would say that it would be best practice to gather feedback from students, right? So the student is the most important person in this process. So I would do quick checks just to be sure the student is engaged, that they're connected to this. And then it might even be a good sort of process improvement activity to do like an exit survey. Like, how did you feel like the high school and beyond planning process helped you achieve your goals after high school, right? And that might help you as a system connect to, oh, we need to be more agile, or we need to do this, or we could help with this. So I think that would be a really good best practice.
Great, thank you. I think that's our last question. I want to thank Alex, Chris, Abby, and my friend Emily, who's been helping me support in the chat. Thank you so much for being here this afternoon. I appreciate your contribution so much. Thank you.
I would also add that if anyone has any questions or wants to collaborate on how to improve high school and beyond planning processes, feel free to contact me via email or phone. My email, it's also in the slides. I'm happy to collaborate.
I think any of us are here happy to collaborate and field questions and give support however you need it. So don't hesitate to email and reach out to us. All right, take care of yourselves, everyone. Stay safe, be well.
Great, thank you.